David Ruggles, practical abolitionist. David Ruggles, 1810 to 49, was born and raised in Connecticut, the son of free parents. He settled in New York in 1828, right after enslaved people were emancipated statewide. Ruggles seized and helped to expand the opportunities that New York afforded to its growing Black community, pushing the city to the forefront of the fight for freedom. When Ruggles first came to the city as a seaman in 1825, Black New York was in a state of transition. Full freedom would not come for another 2 years, but slavery was being slowly dismantled. Growing numbers of free African Americans had created their own neighborhoods, businesses, churches, and schools. Ruggles' choice of occupation, seaman, was one of the few open to black men of his generation. There were severe limits on black life in the city. Most black men had lost the vote in 1821 when a poll tax was imposed on black voters. Barred from the jobs such as cartman or longshoresman, black New Yorkers often took low-paying, grueling, or dangerous jobs. Newcomer David Ruggles was committed to fighting slavery. He carved out a variety of spaces in the city to advance his cause. He opened a grocery store and joined the Quaker free produce movement, selling only food made without slave labor. 6 years later, he opened up a bookshop and anti-slavery lending library. The bookstore was insultingly referred to in one public notice as an incendiary depot, inferring that it was a place that excited factions, quarrels, and even sedition. Ruggles also drove into the New York press world, at first by selling subscriptions for white-owned abolitionist newspapers. Then, in 1838, he launched the Mirror of Liberty, the first magazine founded by an African American. Ruggles' own writing also appeared in pamphlets like The Extinguisher, Extinguished, a reply to abolitionist calls for resettling African Americans in Africa. Since the early 19th century, African Americans in New York also created mutual aid and benevolent societies, providing insurance and assistance to members of their communities. David Ruggles expanded this work into legal aid with the founding of the New York Committee of Vigilance, which focused on helping free African Americans who had been kidnapped and accused of being fugitive slaves. The committee also sought to liberate enslaved peoples who had been brought by their owners to New York. In 1838, Ruggles tried to help Thomas Hughes, an enslaved person who sought asylum after his master, John P. Darg, brought him to New York from Virginia. Hughes was soon freed, but Darg accused Ruggles and two others of extortion. Ruggles was jailed for several nights, though no case was ever brought against him. By the 1830s, activists and abolitionists in the Northeast had also started to develop a network of safe houses for enslaved people fleeing to the North and to Canada, what became known as the Underground Railroad. David Ruggles was a key contact in New York City, reportedly aiding as many as 600 people to steal themselves and attain freedom. Ruggles called it practical abolitionism. One of the people Ruggles helped was Frederick Douglass, who became one of the nation's leading voices for abolition of slavery. Douglass stayed for several nights at Ruggles' home at 36 Lispenard Street when he was first arrived in New York after escaping slavery in Maryland. Ruggles was part of a growing community of Black anti-slavery activists in New York. Unlike in Boston, most of the leaders were men, But women played an important role behind the scenes in providing safe houses that offered shelter to fugitives. By 1841, Ruggles' health and eyesight were failing, and he left New York for a radical commune outside Northampton, Massachusetts. In fewer than 15 years in the city, he had helped to radicalize the Black anti-slavery movement and to build an underground network that would, over the next decades, help bring hundreds of enslaved people to freedom.